Welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday, September the 2nd, and just like that, we're in September, approaching quickly the peak of the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. This is Hurricane Hub Live. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandajis, and tonight on HHL, we've got an area of interest. Gabrielle is on deck. High odds of that developing over the next 7 days, although as we look at it on satellite, doesn't look like much now, but some models do like it in the long run. Active in the Eastern Pacific, and we know what that means. When the East Pac is active, usually the Atlantic sees a quiet period. And overall, it has been quite quiet for the last couple of weeks there, ever since Aaron departed. Well, of course, we did have the other storm that developed after it, but that was really nothing. And then September outlook. What can we expect? And typically, it is the most active part of the season as we approach the peak on September the 10th. But did you know that from September 1st onwards, there's usually 70% of the activity falling after that? Yeah, a long ways to go. There's the peak of the season coming our way, September the 10th. Pretty close to it, 8 days out. And then we see pretty much an active remainder of the season and even into October. Typically pretty active, especially the first half of October. Now, named storm percentage-wise, we see about a third develop in the month of September at 34%. Of course, August is quite active usually as well. Not so much this year, but of course, we did have Aaron out there. That was a headline grabber for about 10 days, 27%, and then October comes in with about 17% of all named storms happening then. All right, now what part of the Atlantic do we usually focus on in September? I'll tell you what, all parts of the basin are usually open for business. The Gulf, the Caribbean, Southwest Atlantic, but most importantly, the main development region, which is the birthplace for our long-track major storms. They usually come out of this area. They're African easterly waves that hit the coast, and they hit a very fertile environment here in September as we get the warmest sea surface temperatures this time of the year. Overall moisture content in the mid-levels is quite ample. And we've also got the lower wind shear as well. So we'll see how this plays on out, what we see come out of the main development region. We had Aaron come out of that area, so we'll see what comes out. Maybe Gabrielle will develop into a big system by then. But the overall theme so far this season has been recurves out to sea. Out of 6 named storms, 1 hurricane, 5 tropical storms, you can see the majority of which did turn out to sea. We did have 2 landfalls, Chantal in South Carolina, and then Barry, that was in Mexico, both as low-grade tropical storms at landfall. But any larger systems, more major systems, Aaron, really the only one, did recurve out to sea and all stayed safely away from land. We'll see if that trend continues for the remainder of the season. Satellite overview of the basin, and a very obvious setup of the subtropical high here where we're void of any cloud cover through the middle parts of the Atlantic. It's typical this time of the year, and that's going to be a driving force in whatever develops with Gabrielle, which is right that Gabrielle hasn't developed yet. But what may become Gabrielle is right there and shoving it off to the west. And then if it erodes, like we saw with Aaron, we could see that also recurve out to sea, safely staying away from land. Always got to watch out for Bermuda, though. Those recurves sometimes can greatly influence the impacts there on the island of Bermuda. But we'll see. Still a long ways to go before it even develops. Here's what it looks like right now in terms of the odds. The 8 o'clock tropical outlook that came down from the Hurricane Center, no change. 30% in the next 48 hours, so it's really going to take probably longer than that, 70% odds within the next 7 days. And you look at it closely on satellite, and this is really just a very broad, disorganized area of thunderstorms. So you can see some overall circulation there, but it's got a long ways to go if it was going to organize itself and become a named storm, a tropical depression, and then over to a named storm and maybe even possibly a hurricane. So we do have models to look at here, even though it hasn't been tagged as an invest yet. Once we do get that designation, we'll get some spaghetti plots on it, but we can still look at it on the global models here, the GFS and the European. Starting it at current, of course, is not saying anything. We've got no closed center of circulation, so models have nothing to really lock onto yet. As we jump out in time, though, we go through this upcoming weekend, you can see the GFS starts to lock on to something trying to get developed here. This is still 5 days out, so the second half of the weekend on the 7th of September, there could be maybe a tropical depression here, still well to the east of the Windward and Leeward Islands here in the islands of the Caribbean. But as we jump out farther, going out past 7 days, going out 8 days, 9 days, we've got both models now showing something here. The GFS showing a bona fide hurricane potentially at this point. Again, one run on 1 day, 9 days out. A whole lot can change and will change. It does have it in a favorable position away from land. and already starting to gain latitude, indicating most likely a recurve out to sea on this run. And then the European is right behind, farther south latitude, and a bit of a weaker storm system at this point in time on September the 11th, right at the peak of the hurricane season, really, but much closer to the islands of the Caribbean here on this run. Let's go a little bit farther out, taking us all the way to September the 12th, 10 days out from now. GFS, you can see there's Bermuda there. GFS looking like a pretty ominous storm at that point in time, maybe threatening Bermuda. But notice it's gaining latitude, and this is on a trajectory to recurve. Not saying it's 100% going to do that. It could certainly track farther to the west, and all variables in play here. A lot can change in 10 days. And then the European actually looks like it's showing it weakening. So maybe some dry air or maybe some wind shear impacting that if it does develop north of Puerto Rico. That would be a very similar position to where Aaron was if that does come to fruition there. But again, European, American here and GFS showing differing solutions as we would expect at this point in time with so much time in between now and then. There's no need to worry about this at all right now, because if it was to become a threat to the United States, we're still looking at 10, 11, 12 plus days away with a typical movement average speed of systems in that part of the world. So a long ways to go, and a lot can change and will change in that amount of time. Now, something that has been an underlying reason for higher activity, which is why the outlooks for this year came out with an above normal season, has been the sea surface temperatures, the anomalies here, the degree at which they're above where they normally are this time of the year. Pretty much you're seeing a lot of red, a lot of yellows, indicating warmer than normal seas surface temperatures. We did have a sea surface scar here from Aaron, and what happened was basically Aaron was so intense and so volatile, it was violently mixing up the ocean, upwelling. And that alleviated a lot of the heat energy from that part of the ocean, and we did have a scar here, but it's already beginning to recover. North of Dominican Republic and Haiti, we still have significant cooler waters here pretty much off the eastern seaboard, but that'll likely recover as well. So we've got ample amounts of heat energy all across the basin. In fact, looking at some of the actual temperatures, you go out to the main development region here and you're looking at numbers 84, 86, 84. You need like typically north of 80 degrees to really supplement tropical development. Getting into the Caribbean, I mean, south of Cuba here near the Cayman Islands over to Jamaica, 87 degrees, 84 in the far western Caribbean, 85. You get farther to the east, south of Puerto Rico, and then to get into the Gulf, I mean, this is just cooking. Upper 80s sea surface temperature. If we get a storm to get going in the Caribbean and make its way into the Gulf, rapid intensification is almost a sure bet. We'll have to watch. Southwest Atlantic here, again, these are the areas where Aaron moved, and we still have temperatures that are into the middle 80s. So they're recovering quickly to the northeast of the Bahamas there. Lots of heat energy. All right, in the Gulf, 1.4 degrees running above normal for this time of the year through the entire Gulf. And getting out to the other areas, the Caribbean, the Atlantic MDR, about a degree warmer than normal in the Caribbean, just under a degree above normal in the MDR. And you may look at that and say, that's not that warm. That's just that much more heat energy that's available to be taken advantage of by these storms once they get going. The long-range outlook does point to increasing activity as we would expect at this point in the season. As we go to the September 10th through 16th, it does highlight the main development region from the Cabo Verde Islands points west, and also highlights the Southwest Atlantic and the Gulf as well. Jumping out another week, highlighting the MDR even more with moderate chances of some development there, 40% or higher. Again, this is 3 weeks out. And then we've also got the Gulf being highlighted consistently there, as well as the Eastern Pacific. This likely indicating a CAG event, or Central American gyre, a large area of low pressure sitting and spinning here. And sometimes a little piece of energy can break off. And if that does eject out into the Gulf, you saw how warm it is. We could certainly see some activity there close home to development in the Gulf there by the middle parts of the month. Next name up, as I mentioned, is Gabrielle. It would only be our seventh named storm of the season. We are well behind what's been going on in the Eastern Pacific, and it remains active out there. We've got a Category 2 Hurricane Kiko, and then Lorena, a tropical storm that's also forecast to become the seventh hurricane in the basin so far this year in the Eastern Pacific. Most of the storms that have developed have not impacted land. That looks to change here with Lorena as it develops into a Category 1 hurricane here. Peaks at a lower end Category 1 by Thursday afternoon. Takes a turn to the northeast and impacting the Baja California Peninsula there. And then heading into interior portions of Mexico, raining out, adding to the monsoon season in the southwest. In the next 7 days or so. So that'll be interesting there. Likely some flash flooding as those rains move over the higher elevation and just rain itself out pretty much. Kiko forecast to become a major hurricane, Category 3 at max, 115 mile per hour winds, really within the next 24 hours. And then it will begin to weaken as it starts to gain latitude. There's Hawaii there. If it does hold together, we could see some impacts there, but only goes out 5 days with the forecast cone, and likely it'll be weakening as it does so. Because it's moving into some colder sea surface temperatures and it's going to move away from its heat source. So look at how active it's been out there in the eastern Pacific. We've had several hurricanes, 6 so far. Lorena going to be the 7th. Kiko expected to become a major hurricane, and that would be right behind when we had Eric and Flossie, the other two major hurricanes. Eric did make landfall in Mexico. Flossie stayed offshore, thankfully, but Kiko likely going to stay, well, way offshore, as you saw. But Lorena may be making some impacts in Mexico, the Baja Peninsula there. All right, coming up after a quick break, we're going to look back at Dorian in 2019. And later, we've got tropical trivia, brand new trivia question for you in just a little bit. Welcome back here on Hurricane Hub Live. We aren't just tracking current activity in the tropics. We also take a look back at past storms that caused memorable damage to communities. NOAA has retired the name Dorian because of its destructive nature, replacing it with the name Dexter. Meteorologist Taylor Stephenson explains the history behind Hurricane Dorian, which became the most intense on record to strike the Bahamas.
The 2025 list of tropical cyclone names features a new name. That new name is the D name, Dexter. Dexter replaces the previous D name, Dorian. The origins of Dorian started off as a struggling tropical wave. That wave became Tropical Storm Dorian on August 24th, 2019. Dorian made its first landfall in Barbados a few days later. Within 4 to 5 days, Dorian intensified into a Cat 5 hurricane in the western Atlantic and made landfall in the northwestern Bahamas. Then, what made Dorian particularly interesting is that the storm practically stalled near the Bahamas, bringing tropical storm force winds to the country for nearly 3 days straight. After that, Dorian made its way north and made another landfall in Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, as a Cat 2 hurricane on September 6, 2019. On Ocracoke Island, storm surge trapped residents in their attics and damaged NC-12. The storm also produced 19 tornadoes in North Carolina, heavy rainfall across the East Coast, and rough surf and high rip currents in our local waters. 13 News Now provided team coverage of this event. Dorian was the only retired name from the 2019 list. For 13 News Now, I'm meteorologist Taylor Stephenson.
All right, last night we showed you some of the storm damage from 6 years ago and how much Hurricane Dorian impacted the Bahamas, Ocracoke in North Carolina, and even here in Norfolk. Tonight we focus on Buxton and the Hatteras Island area. Former 13 News Now reporter Megan Purrier has the frustration from residents in 2019 who felt inconvenienced by the storm.
The Outer Banks took the brunt of the force as a powerful nor'easter hit over the weekend. Storms of this strength usually mean life.
Kind of comes to a standstill.
Dune breaches and ocean overwash meant NCDOT officials had to close NC-12 at the Oregon Inlet. But the road isn't the only thing damaged.
Most of it's oceanside damage, and most of it's affecting the houses that you see on the ocean.
Water spilled into the streets of Avon. Farther south, Daniel Pullen captured images of the storm in Hatteras.
Yeah, just a lot of sand blowing around. The ocean just kind of inundating everything.
The waves smacked houses and buried cars in the sand.
Essentially, almost hurricane strength. I think they recorded gusts to 70 miles an hour.
Pullen says day and night, water overtook the streets, leaving people trapped.
If you have a job up the road, you can't make it to your job. They haven't been able to get mail on and off the island. We can't get delivery trucks on the island for groceries.
See, with the ferry down,
we don't have access to Ocracoke right now due to Ocracoke being closed because of Hurricane Dorian.
People are waiting for NC-12 to get cleared off. Today, people are coming out of their homes and digging cars out of the watery slush. Pullen says emotions are boiling over.
Frustration, and people are just ready for the road to be opened up.
NCDOT crews are working to clear the road, but officials say they're unsure when it will reopen.
NC-12 is our lifeline. It's our only highway onto Hatteras Island. And right now, it's our only way on and off Hatteras Island.
In Norfolk, Megan Purrier, 13 News Now.
Stick around, trivia's next. Welcome back to Hurricane Hub Live. In tonight's trivia question, I'm looking for the name of the first hurricane discovered by satellite. Was it Betsy in 1965, Camille in 1969, Esther in 1961, or Flora in 1963? I'll have the answer for you tomorrow night on Hurricane Hub Live. And be sure to join us 7 days a week right here on 13 News Now Plus at 8 p.m. We'll see you on Wednesday.